I'm in my 40s now, gulp, and I have lived a interesting life. I have a lot of experiences, but I've also learned a lot of lessons, usually the hard way. And these are 5 things I wish I could send back in time to my younger self to avoid maybe a few pitfalls and make some better decisions. Hello, my name is Edward Roberts. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I know hindsight is 2020, and looking back, you can always see things more clearly and realize the forks in the road, the different paths you could have or maybe should have taken. But if I could just send back five little pieces of advice, even just one sentence a piece to my younger self, let's say anywhere in my 20s, this would be those. Now I'm looking back at my younger self, my established younger self, not my childhood self. I went through a lot of hardships as a kid, but when I was established, even remotely living single on my own, this is where I would like to send that advice capsule back through time to maybe have it land in my lap in my early to mid 20s. Number 1, take better physical care of your body. There were times I'd show up late for martial arts, no time to stretch, nothing. I would just hit the mats with the other people in the class, and the next day I would have pulled something, stretched something well beyond its means, and been really sore. You do that enough times, and eventually things are going to catch up with you. I have joint problems in my 40s, which I kind of feel like shouldn't really happen until you're in your 70s or 80s, but the candle that burns twice as bright burns out twice as quickly. The idiot that moves as foolishly as possible probably wears out a little more quickly too. So advice piece number 1, young Edward, take better care of your body, especially your joints. Piece of advice for young Edward number 2, maybe don't buy every single little thing that you even have a remote interest in without thinking it over a bit, without sleeping on it. I grew up very impoverished, and I had this chip on my shoulder that continues to this day, that if I don't buy things that I see and that I want, I am reminded of not having anything and feeling like I can't afford anything. So it's almost like buying these things are satiating this little bit of guilt I still carry around of being poor, even though growing up impoverished was certainly not my choice or a situation I had put myself in. But that's sort of how I'm coping with it, and I've always coped with it in my adult life. Is I see something I like. I'm not talking about gigantic exponential purchases, but just things like clothes I don't really need. You see something on a rack and go, wow, that's a nice jacket. You've already got 7 jackets at home, cowboy. You don't need that, but that jacket comes home with me. So something I'm still working on to this day, but if I could really send back some heartfelt advice to young Edward, that would be number 2. Young Edward piece of advice number 3, be kind. And I'm not saying I grew up and spent my whole 20s being this rude, horrifying person that nobody wanted to be around, but I certainly had my guard up a lot. Not wanting to let anybody close, not wanting to let that curtain fall and be real with people, open up my heart, open up my soul to getting to know people and having real solid connections with people the majority of the time. Let your guard down. Allow yourself to be vulnerable once in a while, and you might meet people or have connections with people that you already know that you didn't even think was possible. Number 4, young Edward, my younger self, let things go. Don't carry around these grudges, these burdens, these fantasies of revenge that you're going to get back at somebody for hurting you. The more you keep dwelling on these things that happened in your past, the more of you is going right out the window. I think if you can just get over things, learn to forgive, learn to forget, and move on, you'll leave that poison by the roadside and be a generally better person in your mind, body, soul, and deep down in your heart. So let things go. Water off a duck's back. Piece of advice number 5 for young Edward, don't stay stuck somewhere where you're miserable and unhappy because you can't see the change, you can't imagine the change, or you're too scared to go through the process of the change. And this goes back to jobs I've had, relationships I've been in, both romantic or just friendships, people in your life that you don't want there. It's easy to stay stuck in your rut, even if you're miserable there, because it's the devil you know. You know what you're going through, you know what's making you unhappy, but at least you can face it and it's clear. Now, I'm not sure what's more disturbing, looking at a situation you're not happy with and sitting there staring at it and staying with it, or just being so blind to the fact that things could change and things could be better, but you just can't see it. So there were times in my life, younger life, where I was miserable either just in a place that I lived or someone I was with in a relationship, friends I had, friend groups that I had, a job that I had that I had a job that I won't even get into the nitty gritty day-to-day drudgery of it, but a job that honestly, when I woke up in the morning to go to it, I felt anxiety and I felt sick in my stomach. It was physically making me ill. Now, I'm not saying there was a resume together and job opportunities beating down my door, but regardless of what job would have come next, it would have been better than the, again, not to sound too hyperbolic here, but the hell I was living through with that job. And it wasn't even a job I sought out. This was an opportunity through a family member that said, hey, if you're looking for a well-paying job, I can set you up with this. And I said, well, that's not really how I see my life and future, but you're right, the pay is really good and maybe I can get something out of it. I was mired in misery the moment this job begun, and I don't know why I stuck through it more than a year. We're talking about a year and a half of my life I spent in this misery until finally another opportunity came for me. But in hindsight, I should have started that job day one and said, you know what, gents, thank you so much for the opportunity. This isn't for me, and I should have tried something else. I'm not sure if it was just me being stubborn, not wanting to give up on an opportunity that was offered to me by somebody else, or if it was just the fact that the wage was so good considering what I was making prior to that this seemed like something I could tough through and suffer through. But even looking back at that job now, I have a small bit of post-traumatic stress syndrome of it, and it was really awful. So Edward, my man, you can do better. Those are 5 things that I wish I could send back in time on a tape recorder or just put it all written down into a capsule and send back in time. No, I didn't put any lottery numbers in there or, hey, you should invest in a little thing called YouTube, Google, or Apple. Those are a little too obvious and maybe a little too selfish. I'm more talking about spiritual advice that really could have helped me avoid some pitfalls and maybe could have stopped me from wasting good years of my life, maybe some of the best years of my life. I will end this, though, with saying I'm in a really good place now. I'm very happy. I'm a peaceful man. I have a beautiful family. I live in a wonderful place, in a home that I'm proud of. I don't know if I can really look back at those lost years with too much regret or sadness. I feel anybody out there, if you're happy with where you are in life, maybe it took a rocky road or a rough journey to get there. My 2 cents. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you had fun hanging out with me, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's the best way for us to stay connected. And if you have a comment you'd like to leave for me, I promise I would absolutely love to hear it. Leave it down below and I promise I will reply. Thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, know that you are very, very appreciated.